About a month and a half ago, I was hanging out with a friend, and I couldn't help but notice how she was glued to her phone. When I asked her what she was doing, she initially seemed embarrassed and was hesitant to tell me. But I persisted, and she confided in me that she was completely absorbed in a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan fiction on a website called Wattpad. I had heard of people being really into fan fiction before, but it was never something I was particularly interested in enough to actually investigate it. I started asking her more questions about Wattpad and fanfiction, and I was shocked to learn just how huge and involved the fanfiction community really is. I realized this was the perfect online discourse community for my mini ethnography. There's a fanfiction community for anything you can think of, whether it be Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Twilight, One Direction, or even Shrek. For this particular project, however, I chose to focus on the Harry Potter fanfiction community on Wattpad, which I observed to be one of the most pervasive on the site. I was coming in as an outsider since I possessed no knowledge about the fanfiction world, and I hadn't really thought about Harry Potter for several years. I started an account and attempted to immerse myself in this world. The methods I used for my investigation were screenshots, interviewing my friend who is an avid fanfiction reader, and reading through seemingly endless user-submitted stories, as well as the accounts of users. In terms of this community's literacy, one must be somewhat familiar with the Harry Potter universe. At the very least, knowing characters, locations, and Harry Potter lore is essential for being able to engage with the community. You must also be somewhat familiar with certain fanfiction terminology. For example, ship is a term that I frequently encountered. A ship is a relationship between two characters who are often not romantically involved in the canon. One can also use it as a verb. For example, an author might state, "I ship Draco and Harry." This pairing is often referred to as dreary. Another term I encountered is slow burn, which is when a story takes a very long time to develop. There's also terms like AU, which stands for alternate universe. For example, mafia-themed stories are quite popular on the site. I observed that there are 4 major genres of Harry Potter fanfiction on Wattpad. First is angst. Stories that fall under this category are intentionally sad and depressing. They explore themes of abuse, both emotional and physical, and death. You'll often see someone in a ship die, and most of the story is centered around the turmoil of the other person in the ship. Take, for example, this story called Claustrophobia, in which Harry and Draco are trapped together in a closet and have severe panic attacks. You know, cool, normal stuff. Second is fluff. These are feel-good stories that are often overly romantic and cutesy. I've noticed that many of these stories don't even have a plot, and the characters don't face any real problems. In this story called Harry Potter Fluffs by user Hey Demons, Ron, Hermione, Harry, and a few other characters just watch a movie and eat snacks. Nothing else really happens. Third is called X-Reader. These are where the story is written so readers can insert themselves into the story. Instead of where a name would normally appear, the author puts a Y/N, which stands for your name. In this story called Sleepover, you can see how users will leave comments stating the imaginary names they are using while reading the story. Fourth is smut, which I won't get into, but you get the idea. Do your own research. In terms of this community's rhetoric, I wanted to focus on exigence, which is essentially what drives a Redditor to argue or make their point. Lloyd Bitzer states that rhetorical discourse comes into existence as a response to situation, in the same sense that an answer comes into existence in response to a question, or a solution in response to a problem. Over the course of my month-long investigation, I have come to understand a prime motivator for many authors in this community, as well as fanfiction in general, is that they find the canon to not be very inclusive of certain communities. In this Harry Potter fanfic community, users have the ability to create inclusionary safe spaces for members of the LGBTQ+ community or other underrepresented communities within their favorite franchise, in this case, the Harry Potter universe. Or maybe they just want to create strong female characters within the Harry Potter universe so they can feel more included and can then project themselves onto those characters. This inclusive environment creates a sense of community, which ultimately allows for identification, where users are able to identify with the author's values and worldviews. This sense of community also leads to mostly civil discourse amongst its users. On Wattpad, users are able to comment on every paragraph of almost every story, as well as on each other's profiles. And you can really see how supportive users are to one another. When I asked my friend why she thinks people are drawn to fanfiction, she had this to say.
People are drawn to fan fiction because it's a place where they can see themselves or write themselves into a safe space or scenarios that they're not able to find in their own lives.
Before this ethnography assignment, I had dismissed fan fiction as being unoriginal and a waste of time. And while it's not necessarily something I want to be a part of, I can now see why people of all ages and backgrounds, not just angsty teenage girls, are drawn to it. And I respect the positive community that they've created.